The sound of Harper's phone buzzing at 3 in the morning should have been my first clue. But when you've been married for 2 years and think you know someone, you make excuses. Work emergency. Bridezilla having a meltdown. Another crisis in the wedding planning world that only my wife could solve. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I rolled over in our king-sized bed, the one we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store in Portland, and watched her scroll through messages in the blue glow of her screen. Her blonde hair fell across her face like a curtain, hiding her expression. "Everything okay?" I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. "Just Kelsey being dramatic," Harper whispered back, not looking up. "You know how she gets." I did know how Kelsey got. Harper's best friend and business partner had a talent for turning molehills into mountains, especially when it came to their wedding planning business. But something about the way Harper's fingers moved across the screen, the secretive smile that flickered across her lips, made my stomach twist. "Want me to make coffee?" I offered, sitting up. "I'm awake now anyway." "No, go back to sleep. I'll be done in a minute." But she wasn't done in a minute. Or 10 minutes, or 20. I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft tap-tap-tap of her fingers on glass, watching the light dance across the ceiling of our bedroom. Our bedroom, in the house I designed and built for us in the hills outside Millbrook, Maine. The house where we were supposed to grow old together. When I finally drifted back to sleep, Harper was still typing. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, already dressed in one of her power suits, the kind that cost more than most people's rent. She was stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision, her phone propped against the fruit bowl. "Morning," I said, kissing her cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and secrets. "Morning, babe." She didn't look up from her phone. "I've got that venue walkthrough at 10, then lunch with the Morrison wedding party. You?" "Finishing the Henderson landscape design, then meeting with the new client about their pool installation." I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made, noting she'd only made enough for herself. Another small thing that shouldn't have mattered, but did. She was scrolling again, that same secretive smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Anything interesting?" I asked, nodding toward her phone. "Just work stuff." She finally looked up, her green eyes bright with something I couldn't identify. "Actually, funny story. Kelsey was telling me about this article she read, about how women never really get over their first love. You know, the one that got away?" My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Is that so?" She was asking if I ever think about Colin. Harper laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. I told her everyone thinks about their exes sometimes. It's normal, right? Colin Dre. I knew the name, of course. Harper's college boyfriend, the one she'd dated for 3 years before they broke up when he moved to Boston for work. The one she'd cried over for months, according to the stories she'd told me when we first started dating. "I suppose," I said carefully. "I mean, it doesn't mean anything," Harper continued, her voice taking on that bright, brittle quality it got when she was trying too hard to sound casual. "It's just nostalgia, like wondering what would have happened if you'd taken a different path." I set my coffee mug down harder than necessary. "Are we talking hypothetically here, or is there something specific you want to tell me?" "God, Landon, you're so paranoid sometimes." She rolled her eyes, a gesture that had once seemed cute, but now felt dismissive. "It's just girl talk." Kelsey was being philosophical. Right. I grabbed my work jacket from the hook by the door. "Well, enjoy your philosophical discussions. I'll see you tonight." "Love you," she called as I headed for the garage. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "Yeah, you too." But as I drove to my office, Harper's words echoed in my head. Everyone thinks about their exes sometimes. The way she'd said it, like she was testing the waters, seeing how I'd react. And that smile, the one I'd seen on her face at 3 in the morning while she typed messages to someone who definitely wasn't Kelsey. My landscape architecture business, Voss Designs, operated out of a converted barn on the outskirts of town. I'd bought the property 5 years ago, when I was still single and full of dreams about building something lasting. The irony wasn't lost on me now. Miles Garrett, my shop manager and the closest thing I had to a best friend, was already there when I arrived, coffee in one hand and a cigarette dangling from his lips, despite my repeated attempts to get him to quit. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too, sunshine." I unlocked the office door and flipped on the lights. Harper kept me up half the night with her phone. Bridezilla emergency? Something like that. I settled behind my desk and fired up my computer. "Hey, Miles, you ever think about your ex-wife?" Miles snorted. "Every time I look at my bank account and see the alimony payment. Why?" "Just curious." I pulled up the Henderson project files, trying to focus on work. Harper mentioned that women never really get over their first love. Jesus, Landon. Miles stubbed out his cigarette and came to lean against my desk. "Please tell me you're not going down that rabbit hole." "What rabbit hole?" "The one where you start obsessing over every little thing she says and does. I've seen it before, man. It never ends well." But I was already thinking about Harper's phone, about the messages she'd been so absorbed in, about Colin Dre and the way her voice had softened when she said his name. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, but even to my own ears, the words sounded hollow. Miles studied my face for a long moment. "You want some advice? Don't go looking for trouble. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." If only I'd listened. Sunday brunch at the Millbrook Country Club was Harper's idea of heaven. White tablecloths, bottomless mimosas, and an audience of other young professionals who could appreciate her designer handbags and carefully curated Instagram life. I usually found excuses to skip these gatherings, but Harper had been insistent this week. "It'll be fun," she'd said, adjusting her makeup in the bathroom mirror. "Besides, Kelsey has some big news to share." I should have stayed home. We arrived at noon to find Kelsey already holding court at our usual table, her red hair perfectly styled and her voice carrying across the dining room. With her were Madison Pierce, a real estate agent who specialized in high-end properties, and Jessica Chen, a lawyer who worked for one of Portland's most prestigious firms, Harper's Inner Circle, the women who validated her choices and fed her need for constant affirmation. "Landon!" Kelsey jumped up to give me an air kiss, her perfume overwhelming. "So glad you could join us. We were just talking about relationships." "My favorite topic," I said dryly, pulling out Harper's chair before taking my own seat. "Kelsey was telling us about this fascinating article," Madison said, her voice breathless with the kind of excitement reserved for really good gossip. "About how most people settle for their second or third choice in marriage." I felt Harper stiffen beside me. "It wasn't about settling," she said quickly. "It was about how our brains are wired to remember our first intense relationships differently." "Right," Kelsey agreed, her eyes bright with mischief. "Like how you never really get over your first love, because your brain associates them with all those new feelings and experiences." Jessica nodded sagely. "There's actually scientific research backing this up. The neural pathways formed during adolescent romantic attachments are incredibly strong." "How fascinating," I said, signaling the waiter for coffee. "Are we talking about anyone in particular, or is this just theoretical?" The women exchanged glances, and I caught something pass between Harper and Kelsey. A look that said they'd discussed this before, in detail. "Well," Kelsey said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "Harper was just telling me about how she ran into Colin Dre last week." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "Is that so?" "It was nothing," Harper said quickly, her cheeks flushing pink. "He was at the Morrison venue doing an appraisal. We barely talked." "Barely talked for 2 hours," Kelsey laughed. "Harper called me right after, going on and on about how he looked exactly the same." "Kelsey," Harper's voice carried a warning. What? It's sweet. First love and all that. Kelsey turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You don't mind, do you, Landon? I mean, everyone has that one person who got away. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. Actually, I don't, because I married the person I wanted to be with. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison suddenly became very interested in her eggs. Benedict, while Jessica studied her phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. Harper's laugh was too bright, too forced. Of course you did. We both did. Kelsey's just being dramatic. Am I? Kelsey's eyes glittered. Because you seemed pretty nostalgic when you were telling me about how different things might have been if Colin hadn't moved to Boston. I never said that. You said you used to imagine what it would be like to run into him again. How you'd always wondered if the timing had just been wrong. Harper's face was now bright red. I was just making conversation. And then there was that whole thing about your honeymoon, Kelsey continued, apparently oblivious to the tension she was creating. About how you kept thinking about Colin during— Kelsey, stop! Harper's voice was sharp enough to cut glass, but the damage was done. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach as I processed what I'd just heard. Harper had been thinking about her ex-boyfriend during our honeymoon, during the most intimate moments of our new marriage. Excuse me, I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair scraped against the floor. I need some air. Landon, wait. Harper started to rise, but I was already walking away. I made it to the parking lot before the full impact hit me. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, had been fantasizing about another man during our honeymoon, and she'd been discussing it with her friends like it was amusing gossip. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Please come back. We need to talk about this. I typed back, I think you've said enough. Another text. It's not what you think. Me. What I think is that you've been lying to me. Harper. I'm coming out there. I looked up to see her pushing through the country club's glass doors, her face pale and determined. She approached my truck cautiously, like I was a wild animal that might bolt. Landon, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been thinking about your ex-boyfriend since we got married? That you've been discussing our private life with your friends? That our honeymoon was apparently so disappointing that you had to fantasize about someone else to get through it? It wasn't like that. Tears were starting to form in her eyes, and once upon a time, that would have made me want to comfort her. Now it just felt manipulative. I love you. You know I love you. Do I? I pulled my wedding ring off my finger and held it up between us. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you married the wrong guy. Harper's eyes widened. What are you doing? Giving you what you want. I pressed the ring into her palm. You're free to go find Colin. See if the timing's better now. I don't want Colin. I want you. No, I said, getting into my truck. You want the idea of me, the successful husband, the nice house, the perfect life you can post on Instagram. But you don't want me. I started the engine and put the truck in reverse. Harper stood in the parking lot, my wedding ring clutched in her fist, looking lost and small. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered her laughing with her friends about our honeymoon, about how she'd been thinking of another man while I'd been falling deeper in love with her, and the sympathy evaporated. I drove home to our perfect house with its perfect landscaping and sat in my office, staring at the computer screen. After an hour of accomplishing nothing, I opened Harper's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, and I knew her password because we'd always been open about that kind of thing. Or so I'd thought. Her email was full of the usual business correspondence, but her cloud storage told a different story. Photos from last week's venue visit, including several of her and a man I recognized from her old Facebook photos. Colin Dre, looking exactly the same as he had in college. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of easy smile that probably made women forget they were married. There were text message backups, too, automatically synced from her phone. I told myself I shouldn't look, that this was crossing a line. I looked anyway. The messages went back 3 weeks, starting innocently enough. Professional conversation about property values and venue assessments. But they quickly became more personal, reminiscing about college, joking about old times, and then, buried in the middle of a conversation about a restaurant they'd both loved, Colin had written, "I never stopped thinking about you, you know." Harper's response, "I know. Me too." I sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just nostalgia or idle curiosity. This was an emotional affair, maybe more. I scrolled through more messages, each one feeling like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Plans to meet for coffee, complaints about their respective relationships. And finally, from 2 days ago, Colin's message, "I'm getting a divorce. Sarah and I are done." Harper, "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" Colin, "I will be, especially now that I know you're back in my life." Harper, Colin, "I know you're married, but I can't help wondering what might have been." Harper, "I wonder too, more than I should." I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, where I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey despite the fact that it was barely 2 in the afternoon. My marriage was over. Had been over for weeks, apparently, while I'd been obliviously planning our future. The front door opened, and Harper's heels clicked across the hardwood floor. "Landon, are you here?" I didn't answer. Let her find me. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still clutching my wedding ring. Her makeup was smudged from crying, and she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "We need to talk," she said. "I think we're past talking." I took a sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. "How long have you been in contact with Colin?" Her face went white. "What?" "Simple question, Harper. How long?" It's not what you think." 3 weeks, I said, answering my own question. 3 weeks of messages, of planning secret meetings, of telling him you wonder what might have been. Did I get that right? She sank into the chair across from me, my ring rolling across the table between us. "You read my messages. You left your laptop open, and you've been acting strange for weeks." I finished my whiskey and poured another. "So, tell me, Harper, are you sleeping with him?" "No." The word came out as a whisper. "I would never, but you want to." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You're going to pack a bag and go stay with Kelsey. We're going to tell people we're taking some time apart to work on our marriage, and you're going to decide what you really want." "I want you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, you don't. You want the life we built together, but you want it with him." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "The funny thing is, Harper, if you'd just been honest with me from the beginning, we could have worked through this. People have doubts, they get confused. It happens. We can still work through it." "No, we can't. Because you humiliated me in front of your friends. Because you've been lying to me for weeks. And because even now, you're not sorry you did it. You're just sorry you got caught." Harper started crying again, big, silent tears that rolled down her cheeks. "Please don't give up on us." I picked up my wedding ring from where it had rolled and slipped it into my pocket. "I'm not giving up on us, Harper. There is no us. There's you, and there's me, and there's the man you've been thinking about since our wedding night. That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you figuring this out before you married me. Fair would have been you not making me look like a fool in front of your friends. Fair would have been you having the courage to end this before you started planning your next relationship." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Pack your things, Harper, and when you're ready to be honest about what you want, let me know. But until then, We're done. I left her sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by the ruins of our marriage, and drove back to my office. Miles was still there, working on equipment maintenance. "How was brunch?" he asked, then took one look at my face. "That bad, huh?" "She's been having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend," I said. "For weeks." Miles set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. "Jesus, Landon, I'm sorry." "The best part? She told her friends about it, made jokes about thinking of him during our honeymoon." I slumped into my desk chair. I feel like such an idiot. "You're not an idiot. You trusted your wife. That's what you're supposed to do." "Yeah, well, look how that turned out." Miles was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" I thought about Harper's messages to Colin, about the way she'd looked when Kelsey mentioned his name, about the 3 weeks of lies and secret meetings. "I don't know yet," I said. "But whatever it is, she's not going to like it." Harper didn't pack a bag that night. Instead, she launched what I could only describe as a charm offensive, complete with my favorite dinner, candles, and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. "I made your favorite," she said, when I walked through the door at 7, gesturing to the dining room table set for 2. "Beef tenderloin with that mushroom sauce you love." I looked at the spread she'd prepared, at her hopeful smile, and the way she'd changed into the blue dress I'd once told her looked beautiful on her. It was a good performance, I'd give her that. "I'm not hungry," I said, heading for the stairs. "Landon, please, we need to talk about this like adults." I stopped on the 3rd step. "Adults don't have emotional affairs, Harper. Adults don't humiliate their spouses in public, and adults sure as hell don't try to buy forgiveness with dinner and wine. I'm trying to save our marriage." "Our marriage faded 3 weeks ago when you started texting Colin. You just forgot to tell me." I continued upstairs to my office and locked the door. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Partridge in her garden next door, pretending to water her roses while obviously eavesdropping on our conversation. The old woman had lived in Millbrook for 70 years and knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. My computer was still open to Harper's cloud storage, and I spent the next hour methodically documenting everything. Screenshots of text messages, copies of photos, a detailed timeline of her relationship with Colin. If this was going to end in divorce, I wanted to be prepared. The messages painted a clear picture of a woman who had married one man while pining for another. Colin's divorce was proceeding quickly, and he'd already suggested that Harper should consider her options. She hadn't said no. Around 9, Harper knocked on my office door. "I know you're angry," she said through the wood, "but hiding up there isn't going to solve anything." I opened the door to find her holding 2 glasses of wine, her eyes red from crying. "I'm not hiding. I'm planning." "Planning what?" "My next move." I took one of the wine glasses and set it on my desk without drinking from it. "Tell me something, Harper. If Colin asked you to leave me tomorrow, would you?" She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. "I thought so." I picked up a printout of her text messages and handed it to her. "In case you were wondering, this is what emotional infidelity looks like. Congratulations, you're a cheater." Harper stared at the pages, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally resignation. "You went through my private messages. Your private messages about our marriage, about how you wish you'd married someone else, about how you've been meeting with your ex-boyfriend behind my back." I leaned against my desk. "Privacy is a privilege you lost when you decided to betray our vows. I never slept with him. Yet. I wouldn't—" "Harper, stop. Just stop lying." I was tired suddenly, bone-deep exhausted by the whole charade. "You want to be with Colin? Fine. Go be with Colin. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is something it's not." She crumpled the papers in her fist. "So that's it? You're not even going to fight for us?" "Fight for what? A woman who's been planning her exit strategy for weeks? A marriage where I have to compete with a ghost from your past? I shook my head. I have more self-respect than that. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice. Every text, every secret meeting, every lie you told me was a choice. And now, I'm making mine. Harper's face hardened, her tears drying up as her survival instincts kicked in. If you think I'm just going to roll over and let you destroy me, you're wrong. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to free you to be with the man you actually want. And what about our business, our house, our life together? What about it? You should have thought about that before you started shopping for my replacement. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this situation to her advantage. People are going to ask questions, she said finally. Let them. I won't be painted as the villain here. Then you shouldn't have acted like one. Harper turned and walked away, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood. A few minutes later, I heard the front door slam and her car start in the driveway. I called Miles. She's gone to Kelsey's, I said when he picked up. For good? For now? She'll be back, though. She's not done trying to control the narrative. What's your plan? I looked at the screenshots spread across my desk, at the evidence of Harper's betrayal laid out in black and white. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. Which is? Colin Dre. But first, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about why our marriage ended. Miles was quiet for a moment. Be careful, man. When cornered animals get desperate, they bite. Let her bite. I've got bigger teeth. After I hung up, I spent another hour researching Colin Dre. Real estate agent, recently divorced, lived in a condo downtown that he'd bought after his wife kicked him out. No kids, which was probably for the best. His social media was full of motivational quotes about new beginnings and photos of expensive dinners he couldn't really afford. He was exactly the kind of man Harper thought she wanted. Charming, ambitious, and ultimately shallow. They deserved each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Staying at Kelsey's tonight. We'll talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. I typed back, I'm perfectly calm. Take all the time you need. Harper, I love you. Me. No, you don't. But that's okay. You'll figure out what you really want soon enough. I turned off my phone and poured myself another whiskey. Tomorrow, I'd start implementing my plan. Tonight, I was going to sit in my office and mourn the end of my marriage. But even as I grieved, I felt something else stirring in my chest. Something cold and patient and utterly ruthless. Harper thought she was the only one who could play games. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The next morning, I drove to Colin Dre's real estate office with a plan and a manila envelope full of evidence. His agency, Dre and Associates, occupied a storefront on Main Street between a coffee shop and a boutique that sold overpriced candles to tourists. Colin was alone in the office when I walked in, sitting behind a glass desk that was probably meant to make him look successful, but instead made him look like he was trying too hard. Can I help you? He asked, standing up with the practiced smile of a salesman. Colin Dre? I extended my hand. Landon Voss, Harper's husband. His smile faltered, but to his credit, he shook my hand. Oh, hi. I wasn't expecting. I'm sure you weren't. I sat down in the chair across from his desk without being invited. We need to talk. Colin remained standing, probably trying to maintain some psychological advantage. Look, if this is about Harper and me working together, it's completely professional. I'm helping her evaluate some venue properties. For 2 hours at a time, in restaurants that aren't anywhere near the venues she's supposedly evaluating? I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his text messages. Come on, Colin. We're both adults here. His face went pale as he recognized his own words. How did you get these? Harper's cloud storage automatically backs up her texts. Technology is amazing, isn't it? I put my phone away and leaned back in my chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop contacting my wife. You're going to find a different real estate agent to handle any property evaluations she needs. And you're going to pretend this conversation never happened. Colin finally sat down, his salesman's confidence evaporating. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're trying to break up my marriage so you can have what I've got. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The funny thing is, I'm going to let you have her. What? Harper's made her choice. She just doesn't have the courage to admit it yet, so I'm going to help her along. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Consider this a professional courtesy. One businessman to another. I don't understand. You will. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Colin? When this all falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't come crying to me. You're getting exactly what you deserve. I left him sitting there looking confused and walked across the street to Millbrook Coffee, where I knew the morning crowd would include half the town's business community. Sure enough, the place was packed with people I recognized from the country club, the Chamber of Commerce, and various civic organizations. I ordered a large coffee and took a seat at the communal table in the center of the room, where conversations carried and everyone could see everyone else. It didn't take long for someone to approach. Landon! Madison Pierce slid into the chair across from me, her face bright with curiosity. I heard about yesterday. Are you okay? Perfect. Madison was Harper's friend, but she was also the biggest gossip in town. Whatever I told her would be all over Millbrook by lunchtime. I'm fine, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Actually, I'm relieved. Relieved? Harper's been unhappy for months. I just didn't realize why until yesterday. I leaned forward conspiratorially. Apparently, she never got over her college boyfriend. Colin Dre. You probably know him. Madison's eyes widened. The real estate agent? But she's married to you. For now. But when someone's heart isn't in it, there's not much point in pretending, is there? I shrugged like it didn't matter, like my world hadn't just imploded. Better to find out now than waste more years on something that was never going to work. I can't believe she would... Madison caught herself, probably remembering that she'd been at yesterday's brunch. I mean, I had no idea she was serious about all that. She wasn't serious about our marriage, that's for sure. I finished my coffee and stood up. Anyway, I should get to work. Thanks for asking, though. It's nice to know some people care. I left Madison sitting there with her mouth open and drove to my next stop, the Millbrook Garden Center, where I had a standing order for landscape supplies. The owner, Tom Bradley, was a good friend and a notorious gossip in his own right. Landon! Tom greeted me with a handshake and a concerned expression. Heard you had some trouble yesterday at the country club. News traveled fast in small towns. Nothing I can't handle, I said. Harper's just going through a phase. Midlife crisis, I guess, though she's a little young for it. Midlife crisis? She's been reconnecting with old boyfriends, talking about the road not taken, that sort of thing. You know how women get when they start wondering if they settled too early. Tom nodded sagely. My ex-wife went through the same thing, started talking about her high school sweetheart, wondering what would have happened if she'd married him instead of me. How'd that work out for her? She left me for him. Lasted about 6 months before she realized the grass isn't always greener. Tom shook his head. But by then it was too late. Some bridges, once you burn them, don't get rebuilt. Exactly. I clapped him on the shoulder. Anyway, I need to pick up that mulch order for the Henderson project. By noon, I'd made similar stops at the hardware store, the bank, and the post office. Each conversation was carefully crafted to plant the same seeds. Harper was having a midlife crisis, she was reconnecting with old boyfriends, and I was the understanding husband trying to work things out. I wasn't lying exactly. I was just presenting the facts in a way that made Harper look foolish and me look sympathetic. By the time the story made its way around town, it would be embellished and distorted, but the core message would remain. Harper Voss was throwing away a good marriage for a fantasy. My phone rang as I was driving back to my office. Harper's number. "Where are you?" she demanded without preamble. "Working. Where are you?" "I've been getting calls all morning. People asking if I'm okay, if we're getting divorced, if I'm really leaving you for Colin Dre." Her voice was tight with anger. "What did you do?" "I told the truth, that you're unhappy in our marriage and you're considering your options." "You had no right." "I had every right. You made this public when you discussed our private life with your friends. I'm just making sure people have the full story. This is sabotage. This is consequences." I pulled into my office parking lot and sat in my truck. "You wanted Colin? Go get him. But don't expect me to help you preserve your reputation while you're at it. People are looking at me like I'm some kind of homewrecker. Aren't you?" The line went quiet for a long moment. When Harper spoke again, her voice was cold. "Fine. If this is how you want to play it, then game on." "I'm not playing anything, Harper. I'm just done pretending that our marriage means something to you. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner." I hung up and walked into my office, where Miles was waiting with a concerned expression. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Phase 1 complete. By tonight, everyone in town will know that Harper's been having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend." "And Phase 2? I smiled, feeling that cold satisfaction spreading through my chest again. "Phase 2 is where things get interesting." Colin Dre's weakness was his ego. I'd figured that out within 5 minutes of meeting him, and now I was going to use it against him. It took me 3 days to set up the perfect scenario. 3 days of careful planning, strategic phone calls, and one very expensive purchase that I charged to the business account Harper and I shared. The plan was simple. Give Colin exactly what he thought he wanted, then make sure everyone could see what a mistake it was. I started by having a dozen red roses delivered to Harper at Kelsey's house, along with a note that read, "For the woman who deserves to be happy. C." The flowers came from Millbrook Florist, where the owner, Mrs. Patterson, was friends with half the women in town. She'd remember the order, especially since I'd specifically requested she use Colin's initial instead of his full name. Next, I made a reservation at Chez Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in the county, for 2 people under Colin's name. I used a voice disguiser app on my phone to make the call, pitching my voice lower and adding a slight accent. Then I waited. Harper called that evening, her voice shaky with emotion. "The flowers are beautiful," she said, "but this isn't the way to fix things. I didn't send you flowers. The note says—" She paused, and I could almost hear her brain working. "If you didn't send them, then who—" "I think you know who." Another pause. "Colin wouldn't do that. He knows we're trying to work things out." "Are we? Because I wasn't aware we were trying to work things out. I thought you were staying at Kelsey's until you decided what you wanted." "I want to save our marriage." "No, you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want me as the safe backup option while you explore your feelings for Colin." I was sitting in my office, looking out at the garden I'd designed for us when we first moved into this house. "It doesn't work that way, Harper." "So you're just giving up, just like that?" "I'm accepting reality. You've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for months. The Colin thing is just the symptom, not the disease." She started crying then, soft sobs that once would have broken my heart. Now they just sounded manipulative. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "You lost me the moment you started wondering what your life would be like with someone else." I hung up and immediately called Colin's office. He answered on the second ring. "Dre and Associates." "Colin, it's Landon Voss. We need to talk." "I told you, there's nothing going on between Harper and me." "I know. That's why I'm calling." I let my voice crack slightly, like I was fighting back emotion. "I think I made a mistake." What kind of mistake? Harper's miserable. She's been miserable for months, and I've been too stubborn to admit it. I took a deep breath, selling the performance. She loves you, Colin. She always has. Silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what you want me to say, Colin finally replied. I want you to fight for her, take her to dinner, send her flowers, show her what she's missing. Because if you don't, she's going to spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been, and that's not fair to any of us. You're telling me to pursue your wife? I'm telling you to pursue the woman you love. My marriage is over, Colin. It's been over for a long time. I'd rather see Harper happy with you than miserable with me. It was a masterful performance, if I did say so myself. The noble husband, sacrificing his own happiness for his wife's well-being. Colin ate it up. Are you sure about this? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Just be good to her, okay? She deserves someone who puts her first. I will. I promise. Good. There's a reservation at Chez Laurent tomorrow night at 8. Table for 2. Take her somewhere special. How did you... I made it for our anniversary next month, but we won't be celebrating that now. Might as well put it to good use. After I hung up, I called Mrs. Patterson at the florist. I need another delivery, I said. Same arrangement as before, same recipient. But this time, I want you to include a card with dinner plans. Of course, Mr. Dre. Same message as before? Actually, let's change it up. How about dinner tomorrow at Chez Laurent, 8 p.m. Time to start our new life together. All my love, Colin. That's so romantic, Mrs. Patterson gushed. She's a lucky woman. She certainly is. The next step was the hardest, convincing Harper to go, but I knew her well enough to know exactly what buttons to push. I called her that afternoon, my voice carefully modulated to sound defeated. I've been thinking about what you said, I began, about saving our marriage. And? I don't think we can. At least not the way things are now. I paused for effect. I think we need some time apart. Real time apart. To figure out what we both want. How much time? A month? Maybe 2? No contact, no trying to work things out. Just space to think. Harper was quiet for a long moment. What if I don't want space? Then you'll have to convince me that this marriage is worth saving. And right now, I don't think you can do that. It was cruel, but it was also effective. Harper's worst fear was being abandoned, being left behind. The threat of losing me completely would drive her straight into Colin's arms, which was exactly where I wanted her. Fine, she said, her voice small and hurt. If that's what you want. It's what we both need. That evening, I positioned myself at the bar of Chez Laurent with a clear view of the dining room. I'd made my own reservation under a fake name, and the hostess seated me at a corner table where I could observe without being seen. Harper arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, wearing the black dress she'd worn to our first anniversary dinner. She looked beautiful and nervous, checking her phone constantly as she waited for Colin. He showed up 10 minutes later, carrying another bouquet of roses and wearing a suit that was slightly too tight. The hostess led them to their table, and I watched as Colin presented the flowers with a flourish that made Harper laugh. They looked good together, I had to admit, both of them attractive, well-dressed, playing their parts perfectly. The other diners were already starting to notice them, whispering behind their menus about the beautiful couple in the corner. I took photos with my phone, careful to get shots that showed both their faces clearly. Harper leaning across the table to touch Colin's hand. Colin refilling her wine glass with exaggerated gallantry. Both of them laughing at something one of them had said. They looked like lovers. They looked like two people who belonged together. They looked like cheaters. I finished my drink and left before they could spot me, but not before I'd gotten everything I needed. Photos, witnesses, and most importantly, evidence that Harper had moved on remarkably quickly from trying to save our marriage to having romantic dinners with her ex-boyfriend. Tomorrow, those photos would make their way around town. Not through me, of course. I was far too classy for that. But Mrs. Partridge, my elderly neighbor who happened to be having dinner at Chez Laurent with her book club, would certainly have interesting stories to share. And Madison Pierce, who was at the bar with her husband when Harper and Colin arrived, would undoubtedly have opinions about the timeline of events. By the end of the week, everyone in Millbrook would know that Harper Voss had left her husband for her college boyfriend. The narrative would write itself, and Harper would be powerless to stop it. Phase 2 was complete. Now it was time for the real fun to begin. The photos from Chez Laurent made their way around town faster than I'd anticipated. By Thursday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook with calls from friends, clients, and acquaintances offering their support and sharing their outrage on my behalf. "I can't believe she'd do this to you," said Janet Morrison, whose daughter's wedding Harper had planned the previous spring. "And so publicly, too? Has the woman no shame?" "She's just following her heart," I replied, injecting just the right amount of wounded nobility into my voice. "I can't fault her for that, even if the timing could have been better." "You're too good for her, Landon. You always were." Similar conversations played out dozens of times that day. Each caller received the same response. I was hurt but understanding, disappointed but not bitter, and absolutely committed to handling the situation with dignity. Meanwhile, Harper's world was falling apart. Her first client cancellation came Thursday afternoon. The Hendersons, whose backyard wedding she'd been planning for 6 months, called to terminate their contract. Mrs. Henderson was polite but firm. "We've decided to go with a different planner," she said. "Someone more stable." The second cancellation came Friday morning, then a third. By the weekend, Harper had lost half her client base, and the other half was asking pointed questions about her ability to focus on their events while dealing with her personal situation. I knew this because Kelsey called me, her voice shrill with panic. "You have to do something," she demanded. "Harper's business is collapsing, and it's affecting mine too. We're partners." "I'm not sure what you expect me to do," I said reasonably. "I didn't make Harper have dinner with her ex-boyfriend. I didn't make her leave me for another man. These are consequences of her choices." "She's not leaving you for Colin. She's confused. She made a mistake. But she wants to work things out. Then she has a funny way of showing it. Romantic dinners, flowers, public displays of affection." I let my voice trail off. "Kelsey, I appreciate your loyalty to Harper, but I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not." "What if she ended things with Colin? What if she came home and committed to making our marriage work?" "It's too late for that. It's never too late if you love someone." "You're right," I said. "But I don't love her anymore. How can I love someone who's made me a laughingstock in my own town?" Kelsey hung up on me, which I took as a good sign. If Harper's best friend was getting desperate, it meant my plan was working. That evening, I drove to Colin's condo complex and parked across the street. I didn't have to wait long. Harper's car was already in the visitor parking area, and through the lit windows of Colin's second-floor unit, I could see 2 figures moving around inside. I took more photos, these ones showing Harper's car at Colin's residence after dark. Then I sent them anonymously to the Millbrook Community Facebook page, along with a caption that read, "Spotted. Local wedding planner Harper Voss visiting real estate agent Colin Dre. Guess the rumors are true." The post went viral within hours. Well, as viral as anything could go in a town of 8,000 people. The comments ranged from supportive of me to condemnatory of Harper, with a few people trying to defend her right to move on with her life. But the damage was done. Harper Elling Voss, once the golden girl of Millbrook's social scene, was now the woman who'd left her successful husband for her college boyfriend. The narrative was set, and nothing she did now could change it. My phone rang at midnight. Harper, sobbing. "Please make it stop," she begged. "I can't go anywhere without people staring at me. I can't work. I can't function. My whole life is falling apart. Then come home. You said it was too late. I lied. I let her hope for a moment before continuing. It was too late the moment you started texting Colin. Everything since then has just been the natural progression of your choices. I'll end it with him. I'll do whatever you want. What I want is a wife who chose me first, not someone who's settling for me because her other option didn't work out. I was sitting in my truck outside Colin's building, watching Harper's silhouette in his window. You can't unring a bell, Harper. You can't unmake the choice you made. So what happens now? Now you live with the consequences. You wanted Colin? You've got him. You wanted out of our marriage? You're out. You wanted to follow your heart? Congratulations, you followed it right off a cliff. I hung up and drove home to our empty house, where I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my office, looking at the photos I'd taken over the past week. Harper laughing with Colin at dinner. Harper's car at his condo. Harper crying on his shoulder outside the restaurant where they'd had their second date. She looked happy in some of the photos, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. And that should have made me feel something, guilt, regret, sadness for what we'd lost. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Harper had made her choice. Now she was living with it. And I was just getting started. 3 weeks after the Chez Laurent dinner, Harper's life had settled into a new normal. She'd moved in with Colin, officially this time, and was trying to rebuild her business from the ashes of her reputation. A few clients had stuck with her, mostly people who cared more about her skills than her personal life. Colin, meanwhile, was discovering that dating a woman in the middle of a messy separation was more complicated than he'd anticipated. His own business was suffering as people chose other real estate agents, not wanting to get involved in the drama, but they were making it work, or at least trying to. I saw them around town sometimes, holding hands and putting on a brave face, pretending that their relationship wasn't built on the wreckage of my marriage. I might have let them be happy, if not for what happened at the grocery store. I was buying supplies for a client's garden installation when I overheard Harper talking to Mrs. Patterson from the florist. They were standing in the produce section, and Harper's voice carried across the vegetables. "It's been difficult," Harper was saying, "but I'm finally in a place where I can be honest about what happened." "Oh?" Mrs. Patterson leaned in closer, clearly hungry for gossip. "Landon and I had problems for a long time. He was controlling, jealous, always accusing me of things I didn't do. When I reconnected with Colin, it was just as friends, but Landon became obsessed with the idea that I was cheating." My hands tightened on my shopping cart. "He went through my phone, my computer, even followed me to meetings with clients. It got to the point where I was afraid to leave the house." Harper's voice took on a trembling quality that I recognized as her performance mode. "When I finally found the courage to leave, he launched this campaign to destroy my reputation. He's been telling people I had an affair, but the truth is, I didn't start dating Colin until after I left Landon." Mrs. Patterson made sympathetic noises. "How terrible for you, dear. The worst part is, people believe him because he's so charming, so convincing. But living with him was like walking on eggshells. I lost myself in that marriage." I stood frozen in the cereal aisle, listening to Harper rewrite our entire relationship. According to her version, I was an abusive husband who'd driven her away with my jealousy and controlling behavior. She was the victim, bravely escaping a toxic marriage to find love with a man who truly appreciated her. It was a masterful performance, and it was complete bullshit. But it was also dangerous. If Harper could convince people that I'd been abusive, that I'd been the one causing problems in our marriage, she could rehabilitate her reputation and destroy mine in the process. I couldn't let that happen. That night, I called Detective Reynolds, the local police officer who'd handled a few cases involving my business over the years. "Jim, it's Landon Voss. I need some advice about a legal matter." "What kind of legal matter?" "My wife has been telling people I was abusive during our marriage. She's claiming I was controlling and jealous, that I drove her away. I'm concerned about how this might affect my business if the rumors spread." Reynolds was quiet for a moment. "Is there any truth to her claims?" "None whatsoever. In fact, I have evidence that she was having an emotional affair for weeks before she left me. Text messages, photos, the whole thing. You might want to talk to a lawyer about defamation. If she's spreading false information that's damaging your reputation." "I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, but I wanted to get ahead of it just in case." "Smart thinking. Document everything, keep records of what she's saying and who she's saying it to. If it escalates, you'll need that evidence." After I hung up, I spent the evening reviewing all the material I'd collected over the past month. Text messages between Harper and Colin, photos of their dinner dates, records of Harper moving out and immediately moving in with her ex-boyfriend. But I needed something more. Something that would definitively prove Harper was lying about our marriage, something that would expose her manipulation for what it was. And then I remembered the recording. 2 months ago, during one of our fights about money, I'd accidentally left my phone recording when I set it down on the kitchen counter. The argument had been about Harper's spending on designer clothes and expensive dinners with her friends, and she'd said some things that painted a very different picture of our relationship than the one she was now selling. I found the file on my computer and listened to it again, hearing Harper's voice clearly as she defended her purchases. "I work just as hard as you do, Landon. I deserve nice things. Just because you're content to wear the same 5 shirts for the rest of your life doesn't mean I have to live like a monk. I'm not asking you to live like a monk. I'm asking you to be reasonable about our budget." "Our budget? You mean your budget. You control everything in this house, every dollar we spend, every decision we make. I feel like a child asking for an allowance." "That's not true, and you know it. We make financial decisions together." "No, you make financial decisions and I get to live with them. Do you know what it's like to have to justify buying a dress to your own husband? To have to explain why I need new shoes or want to go out to dinner?" "You don't have to justify anything. I just think we should talk about major purchases before we make them." "Major purchases? Landon, we're talking about a $300 dress, not a car. We can afford it." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want to control every aspect of my life." At the time, I'd thought Harper was being dramatic, exaggerating our disagreement for effect. Now I realized she'd been laying the groundwork for her eventual exit strategy, creating a narrative of control and manipulation that she could use later. But the recording also captured something else. Harper's voice when she thought no one was listening, when she was being genuinely honest about her feelings. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd made different choices," she'd said toward the end of the argument. "If I'd stayed with Colin, if I'd never moved to this town, if I'd never met you. Is that what you want? To have never met me?" "I don't know what I want anymore. I just know I'm not happy." "Then what do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to let me breathe. I want you to stop treating me like I'm going to run away the moment you're not watching." "I don't treat you like that." "Yes, you do. You check my phone, you ask where I'm going, you want to know who I'm with. It's suffocating." "I check your phone because you're always on it. I ask where you're going because I care about you. I want to know who you're with because I'm interested in your life." "It doesn't feel like interest. It feels like surveillance." The recording went on for another 10 minutes, but I'd heard enough. Harper had been planning her exit for months, building a case against me that she could use to justify her eventual betrayal. But she'd also revealed something else. She'd been unhappy long before Colin came back into the picture. Her affair wasn't the cause of our problems. It was the symptom of a marriage that had been dying for months. The question was, what was I going to do with this information? I could release the recording, let people hear Harper's real voice instead of the victim persona she was now projecting. It would destroy her credibility and expose her lies, but it would also make me look petty and vindictive, like a man so desperate to win that he'd violate his wife's privacy to make his point. No, I needed something better. Something that would let Harper destroy herself. And I knew exactly what that something was. The Millbrook Community Center's annual fundraising gala was the social event of the year, a chance for the town's elite to dress up, write checks, and feel good about themselves. Harper had been on the planning committee for 3 years running, and despite everything that had happened, she was still expected to attend. I bought a ticket and showed up alone, wearing my best suit and my most charming smile. The whispers started the moment I walked through the door, but I ignored them, making my way to the bar and ordering a whiskey neat. "Landon!" Mayor Patricia Williams approached with her husband in tow, both of them wearing expressions of carefully modulated sympathy. "How are you holding up, dear?" "I'm doing well, thanks. Keeping busy with work, spending time with friends. Life goes on." "You're handling this with such grace," Patricia said, squeezing my arm. "Not everyone would be so understanding." "Harper deserves to be happy. If she's found that happiness with someone else, then I'm glad for her." It was the same script I'd been using for weeks, and it never failed to make me look like the wounded but noble party. Patricia's eyes misted with tears. "You're a good man, Landon Voss." I spotted Harper across the room, standing near the silent auction tables with Colin at her side. She was wearing a red dress that I'd never seen before, her hair styled in an elaborate updo that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She looked beautiful and confident, every inch the successful businesswoman she wanted people to see. Colin was working the room like the salesman he was, shaking hands and making small talk with potential clients. He'd clearly decided that the best way to handle the scandal was to brazen it out, to act like he and Harper were just another couple attending a community event. I waited until they were separated, Harper talking to the mayor's wife while Colin schmoozing with a group of local business owners, before making my move. "Harper." I appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne, offering her one with a smile. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Landon, I didn't expect to see you here." "It's for a good cause. Besides, this is my town too." She accepted the champagne but didn't drink it. "How are you?" "I'm well. You look beautiful, by the way. Red was always your color." A flush crept up her neck. "Thank you." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the chatter of the fundraising crowd. I could feel people watching us, waiting to see how this encounter would play out. "I've been thinking about what you said," I continued, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "About wanting to be honest about what happened between us. Landon, I think you're right. People deserve to know the truth." I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app, paused, but ready to play. "I have something that might help with that." Harper's face went pale as she recognized what she was looking at. "You recorded our private conversations?" "Just one. The one where you talked about feeling suffocated, about wondering what your life would be like if you'd made different choices, about not being happy." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I thought it might provide some context for people who are confused about the timeline of events. "You can't what? Tell the truth? Share evidence of what our marriage was really like?" I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You've been telling people I was controlling and abusive, Harper, that I drove you away with my jealousy and surveillance. But this recording tells a different story, doesn't it?" Harper's hand was shaking as she set down her champagne glass. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop lying about our marriage. I want you to stop painting me as the villain in your little redemption story. And I want you to admit, publicly, that you were having an emotional affair with Colin before you left me." "I can't do that." "Then I guess people will have to draw their own conclusions when they hear you talking about how unhappy you were, how you wished you'd stayed with Colin, how you were already planning your exit months before you actually left." Harper looked around the room desperately, as if searching for escape routes. This is blackmail. This is accountability. You made choices, Harper. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself look better. Colin appeared at Harper's side, his salesman's smile faltering when he saw the expression on her face. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice carrying just a hint of challenge. "Everything's fine," I said, extending my hand to him. "Colin, good to see you again. You look well." He shook my hand reluctantly. "Landon, I was just telling Harper how glad I am that you two found each other. It takes real courage to follow your heart, especially when it means breaking up a marriage." Colin's face flushed red. "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it? Harper's been telling people she didn't start dating you until after she left me, but we both know that's not quite accurate, don't we?" I looked between them, enjoying their discomfort. The text messages, the secret meetings, the emotional intimacy that developed weeks before she moved out. I'd call that dating, wouldn't you? "You're twisting things," Harper said, her voice tight with anger. "I'm stating facts, facts that I have documented evidence of." I raised my phone slightly, reminding her of the recording. "Facts that paint a very different picture than the one you've been sharing." A small crowd had gathered around us, drawn by the tension in our voices. I recognized several members of the country club, a few business owners, and at least 3 people who served on various community boards with Harper. Perfect. "The truth is," I said, raising my voice just enough to ensure our audience could hear, "Harper fell back in love with her college boyfriend and didn't have the courage to end our marriage before pursuing that relationship. It's not the most flattering story, but it's honest." "That's not—" Harper started, but I cut her off. "It's okay, Harper. I understand why you've been trying to reframe things. It's embarrassing to admit that you cheated, even emotionally. It's easier to blame me, to make me the bad guy who drove you away." I shrugged, the picture of reasonable understanding. But I think people deserve to know what really happened. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "You bastard." "Harper," Colin said quietly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "No, he's doing this on purpose. He's trying to humiliate me in front of everyone." She turned to face the crowd that had gathered, her voice rising. "He's been stalking me, harassing me, trying to destroy my business because I had the audacity to leave him." "I haven't stalked or harassed anyone," I said calmly. "I've simply been honest about what happened in our marriage. If that's destroyed your business, maybe you should consider why your clients care more about your integrity than your wedding planning skills." "You sanctimonious prick." "Harper, please." Colin tried to intervene, but she was beyond reason now. "You want to know the truth?" Harper's voice was shrill, carrying across the entire room. "The truth is that I wasted 3 years of my life married to a man who was so boring, so predictable, so utterly mediocre that I had to fantasize about other men just to get through our wedding night." The room went silent. Even the catering staff stopped moving, frozen by the venom in Harper's voice. "You want to know why I left you?" she continued, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. "Because being married to you was like being buried alive. Because you're everything I settled for when I couldn't have what I really wanted. Because Colin is twice the man you'll ever be. In bed and everywhere else." I stood there, letting her words wash over me, watching as she destroyed herself more thoroughly than I ever could have. Around us, phones were coming out, recording her meltdown for posterity. "Feel better?" I asked when she finally ran out of steam. Harper seemed to realize what she'd done, looking around at the shocked faces surrounding us. Her hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. The words were out there, recorded and witnessed by half the town's social elite. "I didn't mean—" she started. "Yes, you did." I finished my whiskey and set the glass down on the nearest table. "And now everyone knows exactly who you really are." I walked away, leaving Harper standing in the wreckage of her own making, with Colin trying desperately to do damage control and the entire room buzzing with shocked whispers. Behind me, I could hear Harper starting to cry, but they weren't the manipulative tears she'd used so effectively in the past. These were the real thing, the sound of a woman who'd finally revealed her true nature and realized too late that there was no coming back from it. I drove home to our empty house, poured myself another whiskey, and sat in my office, looking out at the garden we'd planned together when we still thought we had a future. My phone was already buzzing with messages from people who'd witnessed Harper's meltdown, but I ignored them. I didn't need to say anything else. Harper had said it all herself. By morning, everyone in Millbrook would know that Harper Elling-Voss had publicly humiliated her ex-husband, admitted to cheating, and revealed herself to be exactly the kind of person who would destroy a good man's reputation to protect her own. Her business would be finished. Her reputation would be in ruins. And Colin would finally see the woman he'd really fallen in love with, someone capable of breathtaking cruelty when cornered. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the empty house around me. Game, set, and match.